welcome back. As we saw in part 3, early Viking explorers like Eric the Red and Leif Erikson made their way from Greenland to Newfoundland around 1000 AD.
Modern historians have found an actual Viking settlement in northern Newfoundland, which proves that they did make it to America before Columbus. Recently, archaeologists announced that another Viking village was found in southern Newfoundland, near Point Rossi. So we know that the Vikings made it at least this far south. Incredibly, many Viking ruin stones have been discovered all along the northeast American coast, such as in Nova Scotia, Maine, Rhode Island, and on an island just south of Martha's Vineyard known as No Man's Island, which lies off the coast of southern Massachusetts. Given this great amount of historical artifacts, data, and Viking lore, it clearly shows that the Vikings did travel south around 1000 AD, along the Newfoundland coast, and perhaps even as far south as Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So, if the Vikings made it this far south to New England, why would it be implausible to believe that Henry Sinclair could have also made it this far south in 1398, using those same Viking maps? In my opinion, there is fairly compelling evidence that he did. Many believe that Sinclair followed the Viking maps to Newfoundland and then continued even further south to what is now Nova Scotia, and then made landfall in the Bay of Guysborough. In Nova Scotia, the Sinclair landing is thoroughly believed by all the local inhabitants. The evidence is so strong that it completely convinced many senior elected officials from the provincial government of Nova Scotia. In fact, they were so convinced by the evidence that they authorized the placement of an official provincial historic plaque at the Sinclair landing site in Guysborough. That's about as good as it gets. An official Canadian government declaration that the Sinclair expedition happened. It is theorized that Sinclair continued the expedition along the southeastern coast of Nova Scotia and was believed to have made landfall in what is known today as Oak Island, near Mahone Bay. Yes, that Oak Island. Remember, we are still working on this theory that the purpose of Henry Sinclair's expedition was to move and hide the Knights Templar treasure from Europe, away from the King of France. In fact, there are those who believe that the location where the Templar treasure was, or is, buried, was at the infamous Money Pit on Oak Island. Anybody here watch The Curse of Oak Island on the History Channel? Also, supposedly, some Oak Island theorists say there is the remnants of some kind of structure foundation that is laid out like a 14th century northern Scottish fort. It is located near Oak Island in the town of New Ross, Nova Scotia. But that's another story. Anyways, according to Theory 2, after making landfall on Oak Island, Sinclair and his men spent the next several months digging a great chamber deep underground on Oak Island, now commonly referred to as the Money Pit. And it is theorized that it is here that Sinclair and his men buried the Templar treasure, including the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant, for safekeeping, far away from the prying eyes of the French king. During his stay on Nova Scotia, it is also theorized that Sinclair and his men made contact with and befriended the local indigenous tribe, the Micmac. During their interactions, the Micmac elders told stories to Sinclair about several very strong and powerful tribes to the south, and that even more riches were to be found with those other native tribes, which they described as living along a great river south of Nova Scotia. Perhaps this is what led Sinclair's expedition towards Westford, but we'll get to that a little later in the story.
Before I move on to the next theory, I want to touch on some incredible historical coincidences between the Sinclair expedition and the local Nova Scotian Micmac tribal history.
In their oral history, they speak about a great warrior god in their past, known as Glooskap, held court on top of a local mountain and had strange customs similar to what Europeans of the 14th century practiced. And the concept of holding court was not a natural concept to local tribes prior to the appearance of Glooskap. Again, that's a European custom. Based upon these stories, some local historians have noted that Glooskap appears in the Micmac history at about the same time that Sinclair was alleged to have visited Nova Scotia. So, they have suggested that Glooskap and Prince Henry Sinclair could be one and the same person. Additionally, there are ruin stones located all over the place in Nova Scotia, with many showing Knights Templar crosses carved into these stones. And finally, even more astonishing is the incredible similarities in the appearance and design of the current Micmac tribal flag and the original Sinclair expedition flag. Looking at them side by side, they are identical, except that the crescent moon and the star are on opposite sides of the flag. Otherwise, they are identical. You can't tell me that is coincidental. There had to have been contact between these two groups in the past. Similar flags with local native peoples, stone carvings displaying Templar crosses. Is this proof that Prince Henry Sinclair made it to North America 100 years before Columbus? Find out some answers in Part 5 of the Westford Night. If you've liked what you've been watching, please hit like or subscribe to keep up with new episodes. Thanks for watching.